Flames and gunfire on the streets of Moscow. In August 1991, a coup was launched in the Soviet Union with the aim of toppling Mikhail Gorbachev while he was on holiday in Crimea. The coup unravelled, and after 3 days under house arrest, Gorbachev returned to Moscow.
Это серьезные люди, и умные люди, имейте в виду. И уж если они пошли, то не недопонимание, а наоборот. Они пошли, потому что их история заканчивалась. Они с этим не согласны были.
Although the coup failed, Communist Party control was mortally weakened, and the Soviet Union itself quickly began to fall apart. It led to the conclusion of a political career that changed the world, ushering in the collapse of the Soviet bloc and the end of the Cold War. Pictured here with his maternal grandparents, Mikhail Gorbachev was born in Privalnaya in southern Russia in 1931. As a student, he joined the Communist Party, rising through its ranks in the 1960s and 70s. By the 1980s, he was the youngest member of the Politburo, the highest decision-making body in the country. When Soviet leader Konstantin Chernenko died aged 73 in 1985, it was the third death of a party general secretary in 3 years. Gorbachev, aged 54, became the new leader. After years of stagnation, Gorbachev offered a fresh new style. He was shown talking to ordinary people and was often accompanied by his glamorous wife Raisa at public engagements. His New Year's address in 1986 also heralded a new approach to global politics.
Сейчас в гонке вооружений каждый новый шаг увеличивает опасность и риск для той и другой стороны, для всего человечества.
At this time, Soviet forces were fighting a drawn-out, bloody war in Afghanistan. Gorbachev quickly announced a reduction in troop numbers there. At home, he announced his landmark policies of glasnost and perestroika, openness and restructuring, aiming to relax censorship and reform his country's ailing, centrally planned economy. By October 1986, nuclear disarmament talks with the United States led to a historic summit with US President Ronald Reagan in Reykjavik, Iceland. The two leaders had 11 hours of talks over the course of a weekend and came close to a deal on sweeping cuts in nuclear weapons. When the talks broke down, Gorbachev told Reagan a historic chance had been missed.
Do we have an agreement, sir?
But the following year, the breakthrough came in Washington. The Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty was the first arms control agreement to eliminate an entire class of missiles. It provided for mutual on-site inspections to ensure compliance and was marked by an entirely new tone in relations between Moscow and Washington.
We have listened to the wisdom in an old Russian maxim, and I'm sure you're familiar with it. Mr. General Secretary, though my pronunciation may give you difficulty, the maxim is doverяй, no проверяй, trust but verify.
Назначение этого...
На каждой встрече вы это повторяете.
You repeat that at every meeting.
Historians have called this the beginning of the end of the Cold War. The optics were an extraordinary turnaround, but Gorbachev's policies were about to make an even bigger impact. Reagan had called on Gorbachev to tear down the Berlin Wall. When Gorbachev arrived in East Berlin in October 1989, there was a rapturous reception. But East German leader Erich Honecker was less pleased to see him. In Germany, they called this moment the kiss of death. Gorbachev told Honecker he would not support a crackdown against anti-government protests, suggesting dialogue instead. 2 days later, 70,000 people took to the streets of Leipzig. Within a week, Honecker resigned, and within a month, the Berlin Wall came down. Across Eastern Europe, communist regimes were toppling like dominoes. Gorbachev declared he would not support them against their own people. 40 years of Soviet domination were coming to an end, along with the division of the continent into opposing blocs. But while Gorbachev was hailed abroad, he was under pressure at home. There were bread queues and empty shops as his economic reforms failed to deliver. Siberian coal miners went on strike to demand higher wages, and there were protests in Moscow. Gorbachev was heckled at the Congress of People's Deputies, where his reforms had allowed non-communists to sit for the first time. For the Soviet Union, it was the beginning of the end. In April 1989, Soviet forces killed at least 20 people at a rally in Georgia demanding independence from Moscow. More than 100 were killed in Baku, Azerbaijan, in January 1990. There were similar anti-Soviet sentiments in the Baltic states, where protesters formed a human chain the length of Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania. All three countries declared independence in the spring of 1990. On a visit to Washington in May, Gorbachev insisted the situation could be brought under control.
Дело создания прочного демократического строя у нас еще не завершено, но я убежден, что запас общественной энергии, уже включившийся в это великое дело, достаточен, чтобы довести его до конца.
Months later, Soviet troops tried to suppress Lithuanian independence by force. They killed 14 unarmed Lithuanian protesters and injured many others. Unrest also continued in Moscow, where pro-democracy forces in Russian society had a new hero, Boris Yeltsin, who was head of the Russian Soviet Republic. The crisis reached its climax in August 1991, when 8 senior communist hardliners launched a military coup and declared a state of emergency. Resistance formed around the White House, the seat of the Russian parliament, led by Boris Yeltsin. Gorbachev would later praise Yeltsin's role.
В этот момент, когда он выступил против, по сути дела, возглавил сопротивление путчу, это рискованная ситуация. Она могла по-всякому обернуться. И я думаю, здесь надо отдать должное. Он сыграл огромную историческую роль.
Following the coup attempt, Soviet republics began declaring independence one after another. In December 1991, Yeltsin came to a hunting lodge in Belarus to finish off the Soviet Union. He met the Ukrainian President Leonid Kravchuk and the chairman of the Belarusian parliament, Stanislaw Shushkevich, who made the historic announcement.
Мы подписали соглашение о том, что мы учреждаем содружество 3 независимых государств.
Other republics quickly joined them. By the end of the month, the Soviet Union ceased to exist, and Gorbachev was out of a job. As an ex-president, Gorbachev was increasingly disapproving of the West. He accused the West of reneging on promises not to enlarge NATO to include former members of the Warsaw Pact, which had disbanded in 1991. Gorbachev has been both complimentary and critical of Russian President Vladimir Putin, but he supported Russia's military actions abroad, such as its 2008 war with Georgia and its 2014 annexation of Crimea from Ukraine. Later that year, at events marking 25 years since the fall of the Berlin Wall, he accused the United States of triumphalism in its dealings with Russia.
Мы в начале нынешнего века никогда еще не собирались в столь напряженной, опасной обстановке. Мир стоит на грани холодной, новой холодной войны, а некоторые уже говорят, что она уже началась.
In October 2018, the United States announced it was pulling out of the nuclear deal that Gorbachev signed with Reagan in 1987. Gorbachev wrote an article in the New York Times saying a tremendous accomplishment was in jeopardy. Back in 1990, Gorbachev was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for bringing the Cold War to a peaceful conclusion. It appeared that a bright new chapter in world history was beginning. But in his final years, he could only look on as the hopes of that time faded.